Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to see you. The other day, my very good friend Chris called me up. I've known Chris since the 4th grade. He lives in Austin now, and we kind of watched each other grow up. We lived together when I was in college. He was in my wedding, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, he calls me up and he said, hey, you should drive to Austin next month and come see this specific band that's playing here. And I immediately said, no, thank you. And he asks, why not? And I told him, and this is true, I am not fun anymore. I am not fun. I don't want to leave my home and drive to some random venue in downtown Austin and pay to park and then schlep to that thing and then have to endure terrible opening bands. And then I'm going to complain that it's too loud. And then the band that I pay to see will come on, and they will not play the songs that I want to hear. And so I could just watch them on YouTube and not deal with all of that. I am not fun. And he thought this was very funny because he knows me so well, and he knows what a curmudgeon I've become. I used to be a lot of fun, not anymore. And we started talking about all of the bands that we used to see when we were kids. And the more we talked about it, the more I realized we actually saw a ton of bands back in the day. And in retrospect, most of those bands were probably not good, but we saw them anyway, lots of bands. And we started talking about different concerts we went to, and then there was one that came up, this particular band, The Misfits. If you don't know who The Misfits are, just know that they are a punk rock band from the 1970s who have probably made more money off of their skull t-shirt sales than their actual music. That should say something. And by the time we got around to seeing The Misfits, it was obvious that each member of the band had alimony and mortgage payments to make. So he was really kind of just mailing in this performance. And The Misfits were playing in Houston at the time, which back then when I was in college was a long way away from the capital city if you did not have a reliable car, which I did not. So back then, ironically, I was the one talking Chris into going to the concert and driving us to Houston and back. And when I bought the tickets, the venue listed as hosting the event seemed kind of random. I don't remember the name of the place, but it didn't seem legitimate. And when we arrived at the address listed on the ticket, it confirmed our worst fears. This was some random old house in the middle of the not nice part of downtown Houston. If you know Houston, you're like, this is lovely. Like, it just gets from very nice to very not nice very quickly. We walked into the venue, and it was kind of scary. It reminded me of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. There were 2 levels inside this house. There was a huge open floor space on the bottom floor, where I assumed that most people would congregate and enjoy the show. But then there was a balcony above that could accommodate a ton more people, although the banisters and support beams that held this thing up looked really old and really dangerous. But by the time we had an opportunity to figure out what was going on, the whole house, it's like somebody flipped a switch, and everybody was there. It was filled to capacity with young people who had way too much energy. And we were on the bottom floor, standing shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of people all wearing those skull t-shirts. And then I noticed there was a fleet of people on the balcony above us. That had me worried, and that's when the smoke from the fog machine began to roll off the stage, and before you know it, dong, there was this huge gong sound from the sound system, and it began to emanate throughout the house, and that's how you knew the show was starting. Dong! Everybody began to scream and jump up and down. Dong! Woo! And I noticed every time this sound occurred, dong, I noticed something on the balcony above us. The floor that was holding all of those people had started to shake. Dong! And the thing looked like it was going to buckle and collapse on top of us. So I said to Chris, I turned and I said, dong! And And they went, dude, we got to get out of here. And he said, this is going to cave in on us. And he said, dong, yeah, this is we got to get out of here. And so we attempted to leave, and we tried to get out, but we couldn't. There were so many people packed in that old, weird house. No matter what we did, we couldn't move from that spot. It was just packed in there like sardines. We were crowded. So we were just stuck there, watching the ceiling look like it was going to cave in on us. All right, let's take a pause from this story to actually talk Torah on Shabbat. Is that okay? I'll get there eventually, guys. All right, don't worry, me and Chris aren't going anywhere in the story. We'll stay stuck right there when I come back. This Shabbat we read from Parshat Yitro, just from the book of Exodus, and it contains a similar account of smoke and terror. If you look at chapter 19 of Exodus, it describes the giving of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai. And the story begins similar to that of the concert I attended. This is from the Torah. Quote, on the third day as morning dawned, there was thunder and lightning and a dense cloud upon the mountain. Keeps going. And the people who were in the camp were terrified and they trembled. Like I said, this would have been a frightening spectacle to behold. Then verse 17 says, quote, Moshe led the people of the camp toward God, and they took their places at the base of the mountain. And by the way, this verse is very ambiguous. Moshe led them toward God? No, Moses led them toward the mountain. And the Hebrew that's used in this verse for the base of the mountain is taktit chachar, which is, chachar is a mountain. But that word taktit is from the word tachat, which means beneath or under. So it could mean that they were at the base of the mountain, or it could mean that they were beneath the mountain when they were receiving Torah. Now, because of this idea that they were underneath the mountain, there are many, many, many midrashim about the Israelites being under the mountain when receiving Torah. But the most famous of these stories is from the Talmud, which I will read to you now. I love this guy's name. Hang in there. Rabbi Avdimi bar Chana bar Chassa. He said, quote, the Jewish people actually stood beneath Mount Sinai, and this verse teaches that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is God, held the mountain over the Israelites like a tub. And God said to them, if you accept my Torah, great. But if not, this mountain will become your burial site. Wow. Wow. God, tell us how you really feel. Jews, if you don't take my Torah, I will crush you to death with this enormous mountain, Mazel Tov. Now, as if our Torah portion isn't scary enough, imagine being helpless at the base of Sinai while God himself stands over you, dangling a mountain above your head like a yo-yo. Now, what's interesting about this midrash is that it is obviously not what happened at Mount Sinai, because God knows that threatening people is counterintuitive to how human beings come to love something. Now, you can certainly coerce somebody to do something through fear, threatening them or someone they're close to, but you can never make anyone love anything through means of fear. This is why arranged marriages aren't usually a great idea. You can't intimidate two people into loving one another. By the way, have you ever tried to tell a teenager not to date someone? There's one schlepper in my niece's class, and my brother and I agree we don't want her to date this kid. And guess who is the only kid that she has any interest in falling in love with? Of course, the schlepper that we don't like. The real reason that Jews accepted Torah and continue to love it and abide by it was because it was called Besheret. It was meant to be this love affair we have with Torah. Because some things and some experiences that you have no control over, those are the experiences that are meant to happen to you because they form you into the person you're supposed to become. And sometimes when you're terrified, you just have to go with the flow and pray things will be all right. And friends, that's exactly what happened at that Misfits concert. I don't think I looked at the band or the stage the whole night. I just kept staring at the ceiling above me that bobbed down, up, every time they played a chord. It was like that mountain was hanging over my head, and I was helpless to do anything about it. Well, finally, after a couple songs, the crowd loosened up, and we got the heck out of that venue, and we just listened to the concert out on the patio like a bunch of losers. And I can specifically remember watching from outside this house. It was like a cartoon. It would shake kind of back and forth as the night went on. A couple years later, I was talking with some friends in Houston, and we were talking about that concert, and I described the venue to them, and he said, "Jonathan, you went to that show?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, they tore that place down like 2 weeks after that concert. Apparently, the balcony wasn't up to code. Yeah, go figure, he said. I will end with this. That club was like a mountain. Once you reach the top, it was all downhill from there. Shabbat shalom.